Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Yesterday, I spoke to you about a fascinating report that was written by David Wills, who was the agent in charge of the Soldiers National Cemetery at Gettysburg. In that report, you'll find lists of the bodies that were found and efforts by a retired photographer named Samuel Weaver, who sifted through all of the remains as they were disinterred from the various places around Gettysburg where they were buried immediately following the battle and then reinterred in the new Soldiers National Cemetery. All of this happening in 1863. And you know the culminating event, Abraham Lincoln speaking there on November 19th. So yesterday's episode about that report prompted a response from John Hill, who is a subscriber to this channel. He's a documentary filmmaker and a researcher at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. John was looking through the book and he found one of the entries that caught his attention. And the soldier that caught his attention is named Hiram George Hilts. And he was a sergeant in the 122nd New York Infantry. Now, John found a letter that appears in Hilts's pension file that sheds light on his death. But before I get to the letter, I want to go back to the 1863 report of the bodies and all of the personal items that were found on the bodies. Now, here is the entry for Hilts, and it's a simple entry. It says, Sergeant Hiram Hilts, Company C, 122nd Regiment, diary, likeness, and etc. So that's the report's shorthand for saying that on the body, they found a diary, they found a likeness, which is probably a paper photograph, and etc. probably means other small objects, personal objects. Now, keep in mind that these personal items were reinterred with the bodies when they were buried in the Soldiers National Cemetery. So that means that when Hilts's body was interred in the cemetery, the diary, the photograph, and the other items were buried with him. So they're there with him today. This gets to the letter that John Hill found and sent me. In fact, it's a transcription from a pension file. And the letter is brief. It describes the soldier's death. It describes Hilt's death at Gettysburg, written by one of his comrades, a man named James Goodfellow. And it also mentions the diary. So there's an interesting connection between this report and the pension file letter from James Goodfellow. Now, I want to read this letter to you. It's dated July 4th, 1863. So it's dated just one day after the end of the battle. In fact, it's written from a camp on the battlefield near Gettysburg. Here's the letter. Dear friends, I take this opportunity to write you a few lines to let you know how we get along down here. We came here on the second day of this month, and yesterday we were led into battle. We are very well, what are alive. We had 2 killed in our company and 3 wounded, and it is my painful duty to inform you that Hiram was among the former. We had to pass over an exposed place on our way to the breastworks. We had not been in the works but a short time before he was killed. He was shot in the head. But I did not know it until we were coming away. He was carried from the field as soon as I found it out. He must have died immediately. We have buried him as decently as circumstances would admit. The whole company would have volunteered to have him embalmed and have him sent home, but It was as much as could be done to carry the dead and wounded from the field. This is a sad 4th of July for us in one sense, and glorious in another. Sad for the loss of so many dear comrades, glorious for the decisive victories we have gained on the enemy at this place. I have all of his things. This is all of Hiram's things. I have all of his things except his diary. I will send you a bill of money that he had and a silver $50, and I will send the rest of them at the first opportunity. The $50 Tom Gregory gave him as he was coming away from Syracuse. We have lost 7 killed and 33 wounded in our regiment. Among the killed is James Wickham. The other one killed in our company is Patrick Fanning of Orrin. The wounded are Hiram Agin of Fayetteville, James Miles of Highbridge, and Charles Williams of Orrin. It is thought that this will be the last decisive battle for the rebels. Before we went into battle, Hiram appeared to feel happy, and that if it was his fate to fall, it would be in a good cause. You must not take this too hard, for some must die, and it is the good ones that are courageous and the boldest in the fight. Give my respects to all and answer this as soon as you can. Yours, and in haste, James Goodfellow. Now, James Goodfellow was in the same company as Hiram Hilts. James was 22 when he enlisted, so he was about 23 at the Battle of Gettysburg, 4 years younger than Hiram. In August of 1862 was his enlistment date. Now, James Goodfellow, he goes on to survive the war. However, he is wounded. He's wounded during the attack on Fort Stevens in 1864, July of 1864, about a year after Gettysburg. He's wounded at Fort Stevens, which you students of the Civil War know is the event by the Confederate Army as it was moving into the Shenandoah Valley, moved up through Frederick, Maryland. The Battle of the Monocacy River takes place, and the Army comes around. This is Jubal Early, and his corps heads towards Baltimore, makes a turn, heads down to Washington, goes to the outskirts of Washington, and by that time, Union reinforcements arrive. Grant has sent reinforcements up from the Richmond area, and famously, the clerks and wounded, or I guess the veteran Reserve Corps folks and others, wind their way up to the northern part of Washington to take on the Confederates, and they eventually stop the Confederates from attacking Washington. In that event, James Goodfellow is wounded. He survives his wound, and he goes on to live a relatively long life, dying in 1893. So his letter, though, gives us some hint of what the final moments were like for Hiram Hilts. Talks about him going into battle and being happy about going into battle. And for the connection to yesterday's video about personal effects on the bodies of dead soldiers, we know that the diary was on that body because it's listed in the report, but also because James Goodfellow tells us that he couldn't find it when he was gathering up the silver dollar and other personal items to send home to the family. So an interesting connection. I want to thank John Hill for sharing with me the pension file letter, and for all of you to listen to this channel. I appreciate your subscriptions and your likes, and we'll see you again on the next episode. Until then, take care.